Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our State of the Program series. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Michigan superfan Joe Meade with me, and the idea for these videos, if you haven't seen any of the other ones, first half is a season recap on the 2025 season for this team, and then the second half will be sort of a state of the program for what things look like in 2026. And Joe, there is probably not a team with more different than last year than Michigan, and that is probably a good thing. But in 2025, first, it coming off of what was a really disappointing year in year one of Sharon Moore that ended up with a road win in Columbus out of nowhere. Schedule is very tough this year. An early loss to Oklahoma, where Michigan was never really in the game past the third quarter. You end up losing on the road to USC in pretty tough fashion, too. And then Ohio State finally gets the monkey off their back and wins in the rivalry game. And then obviously all the off the field stuff that happened in between the Citrus Bowl. Texas takes that one by 14. But, Michigan, the expectations were not as high as they probably were a couple of years ago. But what were your overall thoughts on this year for the Wolverines?
Yeah, it is quite the tale. And frankly, going into the season, I predicted Michigan would go 9-3, and they went 9-3. And what surprised a lot of people was at 9-3 going into the year, you would have been pretty happy. You're like, okay, that means Bryce Underwood, went through his lumps, but at the end of the year, he must have not been bad and must have developed quite a lot statistically too, because they won 9 games in the Big Ten, which no matter how you splice it, Sean, it's not easy. Look at Penn State, for example. They had more talent and experience than Michigan. They won 6 games. So it's never a pencil in, is my point. It's rarer to be Ohio State and Oregon than it is to be like all these other teams. Now, the way this 9-3 went down was extremely discouraging. I think Michigan's best regular season win in terms of teams that have won games was Washington, who won 8 games. Then the next best one was Nebraska, who won like 7 games. So, not really a marquee win, I'd say, on the schedule, aside from, if you're gonna overweight the rivalry game against Michigan State, who also won 4 games, like that's not really a source of comfort for Michigan. I think the real disappointment in this, Sean, was the way it went down because it all the games Michigan lost, it looked like they had never watched film. So in the Oklahoma game, Michigan was really a play away from being a play away. USC, they were multiple plays away. And Ohio State, they didn't belong on the same field as evidence in the second half. What really sucked as a Michigan fan was seeing just like the same old tricks happen. Week one, Michigan would jump offside on third down a lot and give the offense a free play. Week 12, it still happened against Ohio State. It happened against USC, missed tackling, which under Jim Harbaugh, Mike McDonald, who just won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, Jesse Minter, Michigan was one of the best tackling teams in the country. This year was one of the most like underwhelming tackling teams. All the games they lost, every third down conversion usually included a missed tackle, whether it be on John Mateer, where he completed a 40-yard bomb after. In the USC game, they converted a 3rd and 26 running the ball through 3 missed tackles. And then the Ohio State game, the large portion of Ohio State's, I guess, mini comeback went down 6-0 was Bo Jackson looking like Marshawn Lynch. And no offense to freshman Bo Jackson, he's not Marshawn Lynch. So it was really disappointing on both sides of the ball. I think offensively, it was horrific. You brought Chip Lindsey in to run an innovative offense. The only thing innovative about it was the way it made me pull what's remaining of my hair left out. That was the only thing.
And you said it, Joe. I think 9-3 was the best possible record that this team could have had. They got dragged into a lot of coin toss games with bad teams, and luckily you won all of them. But you very easily could have lost. And then in the 3 games that you lost in the regular season, you were there wasn't really a chance that Michigan was ever going to win those games in the
No.
second half. Like, we criticized it at the time that Sharon Moore and Michigan went to Oklahoma and the way that how safe they played, they were never going to win it. And then ultimately, I think later in the season, we kind of found out why because the team just wasn't very good. And, still, like, they're probably the 15th to 22nd range best team in the country. And that's obviously a little bit of a different, we're grading on a little bit of a different scale for Michigan than we are from these other programs that if they're 15th, 20th in the country, that's pretty good. But like, I think Underwood got a lot of headlines before the year. I don't know if he really met expectations. I think there's still some promise there, and I still think he can be a good quarterback. But I think it is fair to say, Joe, that he did not meet expectations in year one.
No, and I think what's really disappointing is you would think it'd be with the O line not helping him out. Michigan's offensive line
It
by
was
the
great.
it was really good. They're great at run blocking. He had a great running attack, even with Justice Haynes out for the second half of the season. He still had Jordan Marshall, who did a phenomenal job. But um, what really stunk Sean was just their offense was as predictable as it was in 2024 with better talent. And defensively, I don't blame them for regressing when you lose two top 15 picks on the D line, and you really never had Ron Moore. There was false promise there. It was destined to regress. I think though in each of their losses, the story was the offense. Oklahoma, the defense, and USC, frankly, the defense made enough plays for the offense to help them out, and it never happened. And to score 9 points at Ohio State and expect a victory is pretty obnoxious. So between Justice Haynes, uh, Jordan Marshall, I think they covered up a lot of warts in Michigan's passing game and frankly their coaching staff. I think the passing game evolved at times, but it was only evolving against really bad teams. I think Bryce against elite defenses, especially Ohio State, wasn't making the right reads. I think he was hesitant to throw, and frankly, um, Chip Lindsey and Sharon Moore really underwhelmed with the way they talked about the offense in the offseason.
And I think there were certainly some highlights that Bryce Underwood had like a bunch of really good plays this year. But in terms of like being able to stack drives and get through reads and sort of read the defense, I think that came up a little bit short. The first drive a lot where you work on the 8 to 10 plays in practice all week and were scripted out. He looked pretty good on those. And but when the defense, it just seemed like the defense could easily trick him. And look, I know he's 18 or 19 and he hadn't played college football yet, but I think you I think it was fair to say that you hope for a little bit better. Now, in terms of the running backs, like you said, Joe, that was probably the biggest positive this year that you had three solid running backs. Now, one of them is transferred out,
Yep.
but the other two are coming back.
Yep, Jordan Marshall and Cusdall are back with the addition of Savion Hyder, the number one running back in the 2026 recruiting class. So, this is the reason me and
Yeah.
Sean are kind of doing this awkward transition is there's really no better way to say it. So, Sean, could I be the one to do it?
Well, if we've said it before, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, most teams in December preparing for a bowl game do that. Clearly the priority is going to be recruiting transfer portal, but toward the beginning of this, you hear rumors. I texted Sean a week before. I'm hearing some stuff about Sharon. Then December 10th, Sharon Moore fired. All the other off the field stuff we've already covered. Uh, and Michigan was probably, we kind of indicated Penn State was in the worst position coaching search wise. Michigan, timing wise, was in an awkward position, maybe not the worst because they were the one premier job at least open at the time. They ended up with Kyle Whittingham. I think we'll do a separate video, Sean, like maybe later in the offseason, talk about each coaching hire in depth, and then we can rank them or whatnot.
Yeah.
But Michigan ends up with Kyle Whittingham, and you know, let's not take too much of the future on this because you could speculate what he's going to do 3, 6 years, whatever at Michigan. For 2026, for the Michigan Wolverines to get Kyle Whittingham in there, um, the number one question was he going to retain talent on this roster? Because 2025, by a lot of fans, was seen both before and after the loss to Ohio State. This is a building block here for Bryce, for the offensive line, and for a lot of key pieces on the defense. And to Kyle Whittingham's credit, everyone who championed Circle, the Michigan NIL collective, wanted to keep, with the exception of two people, Justice Haynes and Jimmy Rolder. I mean, sorry, Justice Haynes, Jimmy Rolder, and Cole Sullivan, I guess two who transferred. They kept everyone. 4 of 5 starting offensive linemen or guys who started kept Bryce Underwood, Jordan Marshall, Andrew Marsh, who a lot of people were unsure of. Two key pieces of the secondary, Jair Hill and Zeke Berry. Pretty much everyone on the defensive line, too, who had major contributions last year with the option to come back, came back. So Kyle Whittingham, A++ job in roster retention, let alone the transfers who I'll talk about in a second, Sean. But I'll let you take over after that rant.
And in terms of, that when Michigan was open, Joe, I think we heard it from a number of people, most notably like Dave Portnoy. It wasn't really like clear who was running things for Michigan. Ward Manuel was in the hot seat. Would he be leaving? Would he be staying? Now, we know now that he is staying, and I don't want to say that they lucked into Kyle Whittingham, but they definitely heard no from a couple of other people first. But Kyle Whittingham retired slash asked to leave Utah this year. He's a football coach. He's been there for a while. He's won a lot of games there. He took over for Urban Meyer there. And that was Urban Meyer's first head coaching stop, and now Urban has been retired for a while and on the big noon desk, but he is a football coach. I don't know if you're asking for him to get Michigan back to being a national title contender every year, I think that's probably a little bit too harsh. But in terms of setting the floor for this program, that is what Kyle Whittingham will do. The style and scheme that he plays is going to be a great fit for Michigan. And just with the two running backs back already, Joe, from what I know, I think they're going to be pretty involved in the offense. And I think he won't be afraid to use Underwood's legs like they were at times this year. And I think everything going on, I think it 100% could have gone worse for Michigan. Now, had the whole incident gone down like during the normal coaching carousel, then you probably end up with somebody else. But all the other jobs were filled by then. You're not taking a coach that had just moved their family to their new town. They're not picking up and moving again. So I think Michigan did a great job with Kyle Whittingham. We'll have to see, can he get this team to 9 to 10 wins in year one? I think maybe based on the schedule. And let's actually transition that into now.
Mhm.
But Joe, I don't think anybody from a footballing point of view is going to be looking back at 2025. Let's move on from it. And we have a football coach who follows the rules and really likes football. And that seems to be a little bit different than what was before.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is Kyle Whittingham too brought over very good players from Utah. JJ Buchanan,
And
uh,
a good staff, too.
an elite staff. Jay Hill did a great job as the DC for BYU. They were like 100th in total defense, got him down to 13th. Jason Beck's done a phenomenal job both at New Mexico and Utah with kind of similar like mobile and good armed QBs. So you hope that he can do the same with Bryce Underwood. And they bring over JJ Buchanan, the freshman receiver tight end hybrid, John Henry Daly, one of the best DNs in the portal, and Jonah Liea on the D line. And then they do a phenomenal job at receiver too. They get a Jamie French, and they keep a lot of the reserves. That's what's not getting talked about enough too, Sean. They keep a lot of guys that are in the two deep as well. So, if you saw from the elite teams this year, including Indiana, they had an elite two deep. Guys went out and there wasn't too much of a step back either. So that is great news. Looking at the schedule here, though, Sean, probably not as hard as Ohio State's, who we just talked about and who you should view if it is up, but not necessarily easy. I think the one difference is Michigan gets to host Oklahoma this year, unlike last year uh, where they went to Norman. So, um, to be honest with you, Sean, if you look at it, kind of a top-heavy back end. I think the front end, from everything I see, without any team playing a snap of spring ball or whatnot, is workable. The Oklahoma game is highlighted. You do have you do have Iowa, but you get them at home. So if you're Michigan, frankly, if you want the playoff to be on the table, you really, really need to win that Oklahoma game. And before that bye week, you can't lose two games. I mean, I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, this is a really interesting Big Ten schedule. Obviously, Oklahoma's returning the game from last year, and then the way that You have Michigan has to return the Texas game from 2 years ago
Mhm.
next year, right? So yeah,
Yep.
they put the Texas series around the Oklahoma series, but I think you're gonna play like a lot of teams in the middle of the Big Ten and a couple at the top. Like I don't other than Rutgers, there might not be any bottom dwelling teams that you play, but at the other hand, you know you do play the three playoff contend. You play four teams that were in the playoff last year, the three Big Ten teams that were, and then Oklahoma, and then you play two teams or three teams with new coaches. So how good are they going to be? They're probably going to be better than last year. Those three teams. So there's a lot of tough games on the schedule, but only a few, really, really tough games. I think Oklahoma at home, I think Michigan will probably be favored in that game. And then you host Indiana. That is a game that you're probably going to be slight underdogs in, but still, we'll have to see what the teams look like there. And then the road games against Oregon and Ohio State will be tough. But you get Michigan State, your secondary rival at home. No, you get Penn State, you get Indiana at home, you get Oklahoma at home. Can you beat somebody of that level at home to get things going? And then maybe these road games get a little easier if you go to Autzen with one loss. But if you go to Autzen with two or three losses already, then I think we're in a tough spot. But I think 8 to 9 wins, maybe 10 is on the table. But at the same time, this team could be not that bad and maybe get 7 or 8.
Yeah, what's crazy, Sean, too, is I think that Oklahoma game very early is a gateway game. And I think if you win that, it's very plausible you go into that Indiana game undefeated, depending how Indiana shakes out. I think they play Ohio State the week before, actually, Indiana. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yep. So the way that'll shake out, that could be a top five, top 10 matchup. And I'll put it to you this way, Sean. I think there's four matchup games on the schedule, similar to last year. There were three matchup games: Oklahoma, Indiana at home, at Oregon, at Ohio State. Michigan, no doubt, has to at least split those. But you know, I really don't think Michigan will lose an unexpected game. I think those are the four games you'd pencil in losses for. I think with the way Penn State's constructed Michigan State, this is a prediction video, but the absolute floor should be 8 wins for Michigan, and I think the ceiling could be 11, and it's likely they'll just land in the middle at 9 or 10. But 10, no doubt, gets them in 9. It gets really dicey. I would lean toward no, but I think the expectation this year for Michigan though is to keep playing meaningful, improved football in November. And I don't think people doubt it's going to be a better on-field product. It's just the record, you know, let's face it, it really has to follow. And everyone, this is a critical year shot because the wheels can't fall off record wise, because then you might lose a Bryce, you might lose some momentum from this Whittingham hire. Because ever since Whittingham was hired, it's been a really good run for Michigan, portal wise, recruiting wise, retaining guys. So I think you try to keep that momentum going as long as possible. And I think the one way you lose that is if you go an 8-4. I think 9-3 is acceptable. 8-4, I think, is where you start to you have a little uneasy fan base.
Yep, I guess this year you didn't win any games or you didn't lose any games you weren't supposed to. I think like doing that again might not be the worst thing. Like
Yeah.
Iowa at Minnesota has proven to be like Penn State. Iowa State last year was pretty good. It's double digit transfers from Iowa State, like going to Penn State. Like they might have to be a pretty solid top 25 team just to win 8 or 9 games. But I think they do. I think they go 9-3. I think they get Oklahoma and then three losses from there. But it should be an improved situation both on and off the field for Michigan this year.
Yep. My final thoughts, Sean. I think Michigan significantly upgraded their coaching staff. I think roster, with another year, that will also be an upgrade for a lot of these younger guys who were contributors last year. It's really going to come down to, can they win a matchup game? That's something they haven't done. They didn't do in 2025, and with the exception of 2024's Ohio State game, they really haven't done since Jim Harbaugh left. So can they get that monkey off their back? And we'll see if Kyle Whittingham's the difference.
All right. Well, we've got two more left in this series, Joe, USC and Indiana. They'll be out next week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.